Well, hello everyone. I'm really delighted to welcome you all to TNC's latest podcast on the topic of secure home working, making it a robust reality for the remote workforce. I'm John Waterhouse, CEO of TNC, and I'll be your host for the next 20 minutes. As I'm sure everyone knows, TNC is the UK's largest independent network and telecoms sourcing and strategy consultancy, supporting over 280 major UK and multinational companies helping them get the best commercial, technical, operational, and contractual results from their network and telecom solutions. So joining us today from TNC and to share his expertise with us is our CTO, Craig Northveth. Craig, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi John, hi everybody, thanks for listening.
So today's topic of making secure home working a robust reality is really interesting and it's really timely. So for most organizations, until a few months ago, home working was a bit of an afterthought. It was something a small percentage of the workforce did. Typically, it was voluntary, possibly even seen as a perk, and certainly something generally done by more senior staff. Over a very short time, home work has become the default approach for how many, if not most, office staff are working. So for most organizations, there's been very little opportunity to properly plan what is in reality an enormous change. It was just a question of doing what had to be done to keep the organization alive. But now that home working looks like it's going to be part of the new normal, we're starting to see organizations looking to develop proper plans for how to address the significant challenges that home working presents, and to develop proper corporate grade solutions to support this. So we're going to focus on three key areas in today's podcast. We're going to look at the risks associated with home working and how to mitigate them. We're going to look at the technology approaches over the short, medium, and long term to provide sustained, secure remote access solutions. And we're going to touch on some of the key takeaways to start moving on that journey. And look, just by way of scene setting, a lot of research has been done over recent days and weeks and months on this. We certainly are starting to see organizations reopening their offices, but occupancy is still very low, and that looks likely to continue at least into the autumn, and for many organizations well beyond that. Many organizations have significant elements of the workforce who may stay as home workers, certainly for the foreseeable, if not permanently. And also that this is not just a decision for employers. Employees are both concerned about returning to work too soon, particularly if they have to use public transport, but also that a lot of employees are starting to see a lifestyle benefit from working at home, more flexibility, not having to spend time commuting, etc., etc. So there are both positives and negatives to this. So, Craig, let's dive into our first topic. So, could you take us through what are the key risks associated with home working and how organisations might take steps to mitigate them?
Yeah, sure, John. So I think the risks around home working have been long well known. As you've mentioned before, many organisations have supported home working previously or remote access into corporate environments. I think the significant thing that's changed now is that the vast majority of people working from home, the threat landscape and the risks associated with that home working environment are much greater. And I think compounding the issue, the target threats, if you like, in terms of being able to access and target people on a home networking environment in comparison to a corporate environment is much greater as well. So if we look specifically at what the kind of key challenges are then, so first of all, we know that there's an issue around device security, so particularly around antivirus, anti-malware type capabilities, and many organizations where you operate in a corporate environment protected against a kind of perimeter firewall type of environment, that the specification and standard of the antivirus and anti-malware may not be up to spec to deliver on effectively a public internet network. The second aspect is around device management. So we've kind of touched upon device security, but device management is equally as important. No longer is the device secure within a corporate environment, locked behind the physical security of a corporate environment. It's now in a home environment, where potential loss of device, access to that device by maybe other people in the family, possibly, homeschooling and things like that. We've all been there. Again, it introduces another risk associated with that device and access into the corporate environment. I think the third area then is around performance as well. So this is one that's increasingly becoming quite a hot topic amongst some of our customers, and it's around guaranteeing performance of the home working environment to key applications that still sit within the corporate data centers or within the cloud. So many home workers are now contending with the sat on a consumer grade broadband service. They're contending for that broadband service with other members of the family, either other home workers or children accessing schoolwork, or more probably likely Netflix and YouTube and the likes, Xbox. So you're certainly having a performance degradation, and there's no way for the corporate to effectively manage that and enhance that, because it is a consumer grade service, and it's delivered obviously into that user's home environment. So some definitely big risks around that. I think also just to add to the first point, the new targets, also a lot of the recent threats that we are seeing now, typically being publicised across the market, is threats on people's home networks. So simple things like not changing the admin password from your BT or your Sky router. Again, there's a vulnerability there, and it's something that a lot of organisations are really not focused on at the moment.
So you make some really, really good points in there, and it's just one of those ironic things, isn't it? That for it's 20-something years I've been in the networks industry, and the effort organisations go to create effective operating environments at their corporate offices for their critical asset, their people, to work effectively. Making sure that the service is resilient and performant and secure and so on. And now suddenly, people are just thrown into a home environment, sharing, what is probably, a pretty cheap, pretty low performing broadband, no resilience, etc. We had a power cut in our area a few days ago, and of course, no internet.
Yeah.
And that lasted 4 hours. Luckily, it was over the weekend. But if that had been during the working day, yeah, my productivity would have been severely diminished. And presumably, organisations are starting to wake up to the fact that that's not a long-term viable solution. If key assets are working at home for the long term, where they can't just say, "Oh, hey, things are," they're not just working at home occasionally when they can fit it in, but that's where they're going to be to do crucial work. Presumably, that's not an acceptable solution.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, the concept of having a perimeter around your data has completely gone now. Particularly if data is accessible via VPN and you're accessing critical data in a home environment, then yeah, you've completely lost the perimeter, and you've lost the supportability of the network as well, because yeah, you're going into that consumer grade environment, which is pretty much impossible to manage from a corporate standpoint. So these are big issues. I think the latter we're starting to see increasingly become quite important, and we're seeing some actions and activities from various customers to try and address that, whether that be through looking at delivering supplementary broadband services via internet, or potentially extending corporate networks out into some key user sites. So we see particularly with law firms, for instance, where they've got very important partners sat on the network and want to bring them in. They're accessing critical data for them, because they're deeming this to be the new norm and quite a long-term strategic approach. They are looking at that private network expansion into home users environments. They can provide the level of security.
So let's move on to that. So I think we've covered, or you've covered very effectively the key risks. What do you see starting to look forward requirements, and perhaps you could try and chop this up for us into short, medium, long-term actions. What are the technical approaches that organizations could take to improve how they deliver home working and how they support home working, making it sustainable?
So I think the key short-term aspects, there's a policy aspect to the short-term piece, and there's some sort of short-term things that just should be done. So I think from a policy perspective, ensuring that there is a robust mobile or home working policy put in place, and that home workers are fully educated and trained in terms of how to operate whilst working from home, how to handle critical data, how to access platforms securely, what to do with devices, and also policy around how you manage things like antivirus updates, security patches, ensuring that all them things, the simplistic basic things are in place and everybody's educated and trained in terms of what it means to them. I think that is the most simplistic, immediate step that a lot of organisations should have already done, or if not, if they haven't done, should be doing. I think then moving into sort of more of the medium and long term things. I think there's some technology opportunities. So I guess first of all is looking beyond the traditional remote access model where you're effectively providing VPN access into the data set or directly into the applications and services within your data centers. So that is a very traditional model. The limitations are you are effectively extending the footprint of data across that VPN into the home environment. So the longevity of that from a security point of view is not great. We are starting to see, I mean, again, traditionally people have got around that by looking at VDI services or Citrix type services where they present a desktop, and effectively all the data stays within the corporate environment. So again, that's definitely a feasible way. I think the next iteration of VPN services, or kind of always on VPN services or direct access services, are more focused on presenting applications securely. So not providing direct access to the secure critical data assets, but effectively providing a presentation tier, like a web tier, if you like, where them services can be consumed and consumed securely. So we're starting to see new products come to the market from the likes of Zscaler, Palo Alto, these types of organizations where they're looking at effectively providing secure presentation of applications in an always-on manner, so it's quite frictionless for the user. It's all driven by identity and access management, and it's effectively a model which over time will allow you to have the same experience whether you're working from home, working in the office, working from a McDonald's, wherever you are, and potentially across any device. It's a feasible solution. So this is the frictionless piece. I think beyond that, and then we start looking, long term, particularly from a strategic perspective. I think a lot of organizations will start thinking about the architecture of their enterprise solutions, and really start looking at how they can deliver a cloud or SaaS-like service for all of their applications. So effectively consumed securely as a web service, and the data center doesn't have any remote access as such from a client perspective. So all the critical data, the crown jewels, are completely locked down, defense in depth type approach, and then the presentation of core applications is driven on an identity basis and delivered as a web service effectively. So kind of private cloud.
And presumably there are constraints. I mean, going back to the sort of that sort of mid-term option of starting to develop that presentation model for applications. Presumably there are constraints that not all the applications an organization is running are going to be able to make that transition. Is that one of the things which is going to hamper that movement to that more functional model?
It is. So I think, yes, so some legacy or traditional applications that are not able to be presented as a web service or allowed kind of secure access to in a more modern way, they are always going to be challenging applications. I think the pro around that again comes back to policy. So it comes back to ensuring that it's a privileged only basis that you have access to that. So, absolutely locking down and managing and monitoring who has access to them legacy applications that require direct access.
Mhm.
And yeah, where possible, strategically looking at a longer term roadmap to modernize them applications and move them into that kind of new web-based type architecture.
And if we may touch on the commercial angle here, um, presumably this is quite a challenging commercial landscape for organizations. So in the short term, the demand to support remote working is going to mean investment in devices, laptops, for example, um, and building this remote access capability. Medium term, presumably they're also going to start to see potential cost savings as they can downsize real estate, or right size at least real estate, and long term, it's presumably start to see a reinvestment away from physical infrastructure and assets towards
Yep.
more virtual infrastructure and assets. But presumably there is that short term challenge as organizations, at the moment almost have the worst of all worlds, where they're paying for the physical and they're having to start to stand up the virtual.
Yeah, that's right. So I think there will be, and we know this already, there's been quite a lot of technical debt introduced over the last few months to try
Mm.
and bolster up some of these services. And a lot of organizations are going to find themselves for some time where they need to continue to run, corporate environments at scale, and need to run remote access solutions again at scale. So there definitely is going to be a commercial challenge. And I think this is back to the point around the strategic approach for some of this stuff. It's how do you address all requirements, and what are the key sort of business drivers and initiatives behind delivering them initiatives?
Presumably, some of the new technologies which we've been talking about on previous podcasts, previous breakfasts, and some of our more recent white papers, presumably some of these new technologies are going to be really transformational in this area. So I'm thinking about things like 5G,
Yeah,
SASE, etc., as providing, 5G providing potentially the cost-effective connectivity to enable that, as it were, the extension of the corporate network. Things like SASE to provide the platform and particularly the security for that.
absolutely. So I think again, if we look forward, and again look at the sort of medium to long term strategy for this, we do need to start looking at some of these technologies and how they're going to supplement supplement the connectivity models, how they're going to effectively work from a distributing applications to the edge securely, looking at how we can use convergence of some network and security functions within the cloud. So there's a whole heap of technological innovation that's happening at the minute, which is nice timing, I
Mhm.
think. But there's also a level of immaturity. So it is definitely a medium to long-term concept, but I definitely think that some of these new drivers that have been born out of the current pandemic will have a significant impact on pushing towards that model in the future.
Mm. I can attest to that. I decided to look for to combat exactly the issue you pointed out of kids hammering the broadband and co-locating my need for Zoom connectivity with with Xbox and Netflix. I looked at getting 5G.
Yep,
On for just to create a separate work broadband, and of course it's not available.
yeah,
So some of these technology you could see how they would help, but it's perhaps 1 or 2 years away before they catch up with demand. So final question to you, Craig: would it be fair to say that future network strategies, you know this sort of home worker solution is going to go from being an afterthought, if it's addressed at all, into being uh, a key area of focus? How is that going to be delivered? And that corporate network is going to start to look very different. The corporate network isn't just going to be how we connect these offices, but potentially going to be looking at how do we connect different communities of users as well.
yeah, absolutely. I think we've touched upon this, and we coined the phrase "bring your own office" in some previous discussions, and I think the reality of it is that just like all other bring your own services, there needs to be a focus on how to secure that, how to manage it, but also how to ensure that the people that are bringing them services are compensated as well, because it's not going to be long before all these home workers start thinking, well, I'm using my own electricity, I'm using my own broadband services, I'm blah 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 blah, my own coffee and that kind of stuff, stuff that you tend to get, in the office these days. It's only a matter of time before that becomes a problem, and corporates are going to have to think about how they deal with that. And yeah, it has a knock-on, it has a domino effect as to if there's going to be a large percentage over a long period of time bringing their own offices and bringing their own connectivity and everything else. What does that mean for their corporate data centers? What does it mean for their applications? How should they be accessed? It's not necessarily the same architecture that they've got today, which is which allows secure, trusted access whilst on net. Everything's going to be off net, so a whole different dynamic to security management and compensation for employees, I think.
Greg, that is a magnificent point on which to leave it, and a great topic to touch on at the end there. So very conscious we're running out of time, so we will draw it to a close. Craig, thank you as always for bringing your very interesting thoughts and expertise to our listeners. Thank you to everyone for listening. And as always, please do let us know any questions you may have about this or any other network and telecoms topic. You can get in touch with us through our website, networkcollective.co.uk, or any of the usual social channels. And we look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thank you.